with us today, Peter Stricker.
Yes.
From Seawell. You're the president of Seawell Technology. We'll be discussing a great new technology that could essentially help us a lot over here in Malibu with what we went through. We'll dive into that in just a second. But folks, we had some major breaking news. So let's just spend maybe 7 or 8 minutes talking through that, what it means for us before we sort of dive into our focal point for
Presidential
today.
caliber news.
The big beautiful executive order.
The big beautiful. So maybe one of you just educate the audience. Maybe perhaps everybody knows, but what was the bill? What does it mean for us?
So there was an executive order on Tuesday, I think it was, this week, out of the White House. No, I don't think anybody saw this coming, but President Trump was apparently dissatisfied with the rebuilding progress in Los Angeles, as we all are, issued an executive order essentially saying they were going to take over a lot of the rebuild permitting in the Palisades burn zone.
And Altadena? Or just
Yes,
Val?
sorry. All this, the Southern California fires, the Los Angeles fires. So we don't have a lot of details. He tasked the director of the SBA and the director of FEMA, I believe, Secretary of FEMA,
And
to 30 days.
And he put the director of EPA in charge of this operation,
That's
Lee
right.
Zedrell.
Yeah.
So they have 30 days to come up with solutions. And then I think it's within 90 days, they're supposed to be on the ground issuing permits.
So we'll see government actually do something within 30 days, which City of Malibu government, they said 30-day plan review. I don't think that happened for anybody. So, federal government versus little town in California, who's going to win?
What's the general sentiment, guys? Well, what are we hearing on the street? People happy about this? People afraid?
People are excited about it.
Yeah, I think are you? Okay.
I think
there's people that are excited.
Well, for sure, I think people are desperate for any sort of dramatic change in the progress that we're making. There are a lot of questions, like self-certification is going to be a big part of this, a big component. If your jurisdiction, Malibu in this case, hasn't given you a permit within 60 days of your application, you're allowed to go through this federal process. And your contractor is allowed to self-certify that they're following all the local and state building codes, and then they can go.
And that is the new message that everybody who had applied for an SBA loan had in their SBA portal this morning, and were informed about that happening. So
That's right. So the SBA has jumped on it right away.
or was jumped on it.
Not a ton of details from them either, but one tidbit they had was, so self-certification has always meant your licensed professional puts their license on the line basically and says we're following all the codes, so let us build.
Mm-hmm.
What the SBA said is that if you're an owner builder,
You can even do it
depending
yourself.
on eligibility criteria, whatever
that is.
that turns out to be, you can do it yourself. So that opens up
That opens up
a huge number of questions.
a huge.
Everybody building whatever they want.
It's kind of interesting because Tuesday morning they sort of showed up as an alert 6 a.m. in the morning, and throughout the day, of course, the chat rooms and the messages were exploding. But I got interesting reactions from people that I wouldn't have expected to react that way. So on one instance, staunch Trump critic was very supportive, embracing this with open arms. On the other instance, a very thoughtful, sort of intellectually very capable person, goes deep into things, said, this reminded him of Ronald Reagan's language, where he said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." and I was telling him that, listen, I mean, we are at like 20 odd permits, whatever.
24 still?
24 at the end of 1 year. Can things get any worse?
No.
And his point was, wait and watch how much worse it gets, because this is about retribution. I don't know.
You mean presidential retribution against
Yes.
mayoral nonsense?
Well, against California nonsense.
What could that retribution look like? What is the fear?
The retribution could look like coming into this, and then there'll be total impasse. there'll be total impasse because at the end of the day, there is still some city codes and some city zoning ordinances that we must follow. The city inspectors are still doing the rounds to inspect the properties and issue certificate of occupancy. Now, the feds permit a property. Who issues the certificate of occupancy? You know, who does the
I assume
tracking
that's
at
still
ground
the city
level?
of Malibu. And the inspectors will be the city of Malibu.
Well, the inspectors may be the city of Malibu, but if they have not approved the permit, then what are they inspecting to? So if the inspector comes and says,
General code, right?
No, because the approved plans and specifications are part of the inspection process.
Correct.
So if they don't trust that, why would they inspect?
Well, okay, so let's use the city of Los Angeles, which was allowed self-certification for these rebuilds. What do those inspectors look at?
well, so those self-certifications are still fundamentally coming under the blanket umbrella of Los Angeles City issuing the permits. So that's taking it full. So it may be an arrangement of sorts like that. But in this case, it's two completely separate entities. It's the Fed and the city, and they are apparently not talking to each other. And I can't see how this can happen if they don't talk to each other.
It'll be tense. Is the only
Because
really
it's
thing
one
you
thing,
can
look,
expect.
I mean, on one hand, and you know, we were exchanging messages with council members as well, and one of the points that I made was the part of the most favorable experience in the rebuild process, there isn't that much, you know, favorable, but was the debris removal. That really exceeded all our expectations from historically what we had heard, from how many months it had taken to how many months that it actually took. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did a bang-up job. In fact, those that went private started to regret that because they had heard from Lahaina and others that it took 2 years and there'll be, you know, still debris on their property for as many years. 3 months. It was done.
I mean, our property
And they
was
set up-
a
what
day and a
kick-ass-
half.
And what a kick-ass operation did they set up on Temescal, you know, to sort of recycle the concrete and the rebar and all that stuff. That was world-class.
They did my property and the neighbors same time one day, and we were very early. This was, when did you get yours cleared?
April 22nd.
Yeah, I think we were in March. And they said their goal was to we felt very lucky because their goal was to finish all the debris removal by January 7th, 2026.
And they were 7 months ahead of schedule.
Yeah, they really beat
They did a fantastic job.
Impressive.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job. However, and they did a fantastic job because they were unshackled, right? I mean, the city was trying to, okay, did you do soil testing? Did you do asbestos testing? They'll say, you know what?
We'll give you the
got it.
records later.
We got it. We got it. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to dig out 2 feet of dirt or whatever, 6 inches of dirt or whatever. Forget the soil is tested. Because we're going to take it out. So they, in some ways, no pun intended, bulldoze their way through the process, right? Now, rebuilding, now debris removal is one part of it, but rebuilding is a whole different ballgame. I mean, you know, if an owner self-certifies and you build a certain height and Arno starts building and obstructs somebody's view,
It's true.
it's going to be held to pay
Is the
for.
federal government going to care about view corridors? They're going to care about your neighbor across the street that can't see the blue ocean anymore.
Probably not.
They'll be like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's safe.
That's actually a great point. I've been thinking so much about building and safety, but how does planning come into this at all?
That's right.
That's right. Is FEMA checking Malibu's setbacks and weird height requirements and bulk requirements? Ought to be nuts. So I'm not.
Yeah, and that, you know, how many conversations have we had in terms of folks that had unpermitted square footage, but they had it, legit, but unpermitted. Do they get to keep it? Do they get to add 10% to that? How are those adjudications going to be made, et cetera? So much unknown, but overall, I would still view it as a positive because we've been screaming for the last several months. And finally, it looks like maybe it's a Wall Street Journal article, maybe it's a whole host of things that have finally got the president's attention. And I can't imagine this not being a good thing, right? I mean, at a minimum,
It's
it should
pressure
generate-
that'll get movement somewhere, right? Right now, we're stuck. It seems
I mean,
like
I
we're
suppose
pretty
the-
stuck.
I
We need
suppose the
somebody
worst
to
case,
hit our
the
process
worst case outcome
forward.
could be that, you know, the city and the county says, you know what, okay, feds want to come do this, we'll back right off, let them do it. You know, so that could be.
Because they
a
can't do
negative
anything
outcome.
that slows them down or contradicts it, because that would make them look so bad.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and I've been thinking about that too. The only thing that could really slow this down would be like a lawsuit from the state of California, but that's very politically dicey seat for Governor Newsom.
Yeah, he can't do that.
that?
He can't do that.
Probably not. I wouldn't expect him to do that. But look, the system broke. Like, we had a year more. If you go back to Woolsey, we didn't fix ourselves. We had a chance to do this internally, and through choice and happenstance and lack of courage, we did not fix ourselves. And it's like, there was the easy way to do it, which that's, keeping it in-house and fixing the system within. And this is the hard way. And we don't know what's going to happen. And the baby could be thrown out with the bathwater because there was so much resistance. And I just think that the time of the obstructionists, it's gone. Like, there's not going to be an appetite for it in the future. In California, in the country, especially for rebuild situations, if you're standing in the way of people building, especially rebuilding, get out of here.
Yeah, NIMBYs, go take a hike.
Yeah, I think that's the message loud and clear. I think there's some folks within Malibu, as we experienced in the meeting yesterday at City Hall, that think that Malibu was not part of the news release. I don't think Malibu was
I live in
specifically called
Malibu,
out.
and I got the letter from the SBA. So
Yeah.
Anybody who got that?
That means they're
the language
saying-
is super clear, but they talk about the Palisades
Yeah.
and the Eaton area. So I think because they say Eaton instead of Altadena, they're talking about fires. And because the Palisades fire entered into Malibu, I think would be covered.
All right, so rapid fire, and then we'll dive into our main topic of the day. If Flea Zeter was here and you had one thing to tell him to do, what would that be?
Get electronic plan review into every jurisdiction. Use the same system, Epic LA. If that works, use that.
Let people build.
meet with the people on site, see what's actually going on, and get the permit issued.
He stole mine. I was going to say day zero, get everybody to the site, let's make the talk, let's do the checklist, let's go. All right, so segueing into what even caused us to be in this situation, fundamentally, we've talked about this a lot, lack of water. Our hydrants are dry, we didn't have enough water. We can use the massive body of water next to us to douse out the fires. I mean, of course, I'm simplifying it. There was a lot going on back then. But Peter, you might have a solution for us. So tell us what your company does and just walk us through all of it.
Yeah, so I am in the middle of developing technology and projects kind of at the same time that essentially addresses the water problem in California, because it's there's the immediate kind of experience that Malibu had with the reservoir being dry in the middle of the fire. That's a tiny little moment in the kind of the bigger picture of California water, and so we've been looking at it as a bigger problem. And the first problem is there's the ocean right there, but the word desalination
Scares everyone.
puts everybody on edge. Like, it's a scary word.
Why is that?
Well, I think, in some respects, it kind of goes back to the topic you guys were just on, which is the idea that there's no roadblocks to development in California. And so water has been traditionally used as a throttle on development because you can't get a water meter, you can't build.
It's true.
And so it's kind of, and I don't know all the backstory. I wasn't in California probably at the time this whole idea came up, that desalination was sort of the poster child for that particular problem. But that's certainly been a lot of the undercurrent of trying to do a new technology in desalination, is just to say the word and people go, yeah, maybe. Fortunately, there's a lot of thinking now going on, and new ideas, new technologies that kind of shift that equation from big onshore plant that has its challenges to what we're doing, which is an offshore buoy that's small and easy to deploy and low impact on the environment and lower energy consumption, and just all the things that that we would like to see in a new approach to desal. We've tried to embody all that.
So can I ask you, sure, a smaller footprint? If you said, you're correct. Everybody thinks desalination, massive treatment facility, takes up a lot of public land, that costs
Right.
money. What's the square footage or cubic volume of your
Well, it's,
technology.
I mean, in some respects, thinking about land, it's this, the square footage is zero because we're in the water. So we displace some water. We have, we have to put an anchor down to keep it in position. But it's basically, it's a tube that fits in a shipping container.
Okay, so it's not like a huge oil tanker sitting out
No, no, no.
500 yards off the shore.
Not at all. And in fact, it's vertical. It's mostly underwater. There's a little bit sticking up above, so you don't see it. It just does its business, out in the water. It just brings fresh water to shore. So the advantage there is that you're doing half the volume of water has to be pumped. Because on a plant, you bring seawater in, and then you put brine back out again. In our case, we distribute the brine out around the buoy.
Yeah.
So it's a buoy that's effectively sitting in the middle of the ocean. How far typically
So
from
it's,
shore?
somewhere between half a mile and a mile.
And it's anchored to the seabed.
It's anchored to the seabed.
So it kind of roughly stays where it's
Yeah,
supposed to.
it
It'll
drifts
float
back
around
and
a
forth,
little
but
bit.
we have a flexible umbilical
Yeah.
that goes down to a pipe on the seafloor that then takes the water to shore.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's bringing in the ocean water, doing its thing. The factory's running inside the buoy.
Yep.
The brine is getting spread back out,
Right.
and then the water, the fresh water now, is being brought back over to shore.
To shore. Yeah.
How much?
So the buoys, these container-sized buoys, produce 100,000 gallons a day, each one. So it's not, a city environment. That's not a lot of water, but you put a group of them together, and suddenly you start to multiply. And that's part of the beauty of this is that we can, because it's a small unit size, we can incrementally build up. You take them away if we have to, but the idea is that, say now when we're trying to get the first projects done, and Malibu being a candidate for first project, we'll bring in a buoy, get the regulators there. Everybody piles on, understands how it operates. We have marine biologists studying the marine environment around it, and then as everybody gets comfortable that this thing is not going to do anything,
It's not going to kill
particularly
the
dramatic.
fish. Right?
No, it doesn't. And we spent a lot of time, starting with kind of a blank sheet of paper. We thought about in California, how could you do desalination in a way that's better than the current approach, and doesn't kill fish, uses less energy, no, shoreside footprint is essentially zero, powered by renewable energy. This is something else that happens in our group up in Santa Barbara. Is we have a wave energy company, and we have a tidal energy company. They're also startups that produce devices that we can plug into the water buoy and have the electricity being produced out in the water that powers the buoy that brings the water to shore.
So what's the impact of the brine? That's probably something that fish that are close to where that brine comes out live. They probably don't like that.
Well, it's interesting. So brine, in the early days of desalination plants, and especially places that have high salinity and trying to get as much fresh water out as you can get on an onshore plant, what happens is the brine is fairly salty. So when you put it back out in the pipe that's running along the bottom of the ocean, if you just put it out, it sits on the bottom because it's denser than
heavy.
seawater, right?
Yeah.
And so you get this pool of brine, and so there's definitely fish mortality associated with fish, having to inhabit that brine pool. In our case, we don't take very much fresh water out of the seawater. In other words, what's called the recovery rate is much lower, and so the brine is relatively dilute, and it's at the top of the water column. So when we put it out, gravity has it descend, but it's mixing as it goes down, and so it's a pretty benign way to do it.
So it would be measurable, but a fish would not notice that something was going on.
If we look at the standards for what the Water Control Board has, something called the Ocean Plan that sets the standards for desalination and what the impact of brine could be. And so they look at the distance that the brine propagates from the discharge point and what the salinity is, like out to, I think it's 100 meters or something is we're by 2 meters, we're back within 2 parts per thousand of ambient salinity. So because it's also a small plant. This is a small buoy. It's not one huge pipe that's dumping a lot of brine out, but also, it's just the way we set it up and being at the top of the water column. So I think that the discharge is really a non-issue. The other point to make is we don't use chemicals at all in our process. So the discharge is just
Brine.
seawater brine, nothing else.
So may I ask, we have
Yeah.
a bit of a septic problem in Malibu,
Yes.
and there's constant debate about nitrogen levels offshore.
Uh-huh.
Is this system going to somehow dilute that and make it no longer a problem?
Of course it will.
All right.
That's the answer you were looking for.
I mean, no, seriously, would it have any effect on that?
Well, I don't know. I haven't really looked at nitrogen as sort
like a
of
study.
And they might be far enough out where it's not really affecting
yeah, we are trying to get out into
the control board's worried about.
yeah.
Now, you said that you're not producing as much fresh water as the
per gallon of seawater, we take less fresh water.
So
out.
that's interesting to me because usually technological advancements, people are trying to become more efficient, but it sounds like you guys are taking a more passive approach. What's the advantage there?
Well, there's a couple of advantages. One is, as I said, more dilute brine means that it just gets back to ambient more quickly. But the reason we're doing it primarily is because we have higher energy efficiency. So we don't care about water efficiency because we're in the water. We care a lot about energy efficiency.
How many gallons of seawater do you need for a gallon of fresh water?
In our case, it's about 2 to 1.
2 to 1. Okay,
That's pretty good, actually.
It seems remarkable.
Sorry, 2 to. I'm not getting that. It's the recovery rate is like 32%, which means we take 32% of that seawater. So it's really like a third.
A third, yeah, 1 to 3.
Yeah, so, 1 to 3.
And I might have missed this. How is it powered?
So the kind of going in approach for us is to emphasize the water production and not the renewable energy part, but that's sort of step 2. So it's going to be power cable run out to the buoy from shore, and so
Does it also run along the seafloor?
well, actually we're running it inside the pipe, so we don't have another. We're using it as a conduit. Yeah.
And it's the same pipe that returns the water back to the shore.
Well, yeah, it's the same exactly. So one pipe, that's it, just one
Got
pipe.
everything in it.
He's got everything in it.
Yeah, I think. And typically, what is the distance? Is there a certain distance that it needs to be from land?
Well, it's water depth is what we're looking at. And so in cases where you're exposed to the full force of the Pacific Ocean, when you have big wave, we'll have to add deeper water. And so we've got a specified depth for that. For here, because we're somewhat protected, the maximum storm conditions here give us a little more leeway, so we can be shallower, but we're still at least 50 feet plus. So
You still want us to stay out of the way of the surface.
we have to set the servers, and this is
And there's ships and boats and all that.
and so Coast Guard. We have Coast Guard lighting that keeps us from being run into. Coast Guard has already approved our vessel as sort of as an unmanned, approved as an unmanned vessel. So we've got that kind of.
Seems like a major move.
It's a-
of permitting, right?
It is a major move, yeah, for sure. That we don't have to ask
So,
somebody.
is it something that you turn on and off as you need water, or is it something that is constantly on and then is the water coming out and it's getting stored somewhere?
So traditionally, these kind of treatment plants, you want to keep them running all the time, just because it's better for the membranes that are doing the filtration, pumps, everything is sort of designed to be all on all the time. However, part of what we've approached in our design is to be able to use renewable energy if in cases where there is no shore power at all and we really want to be 100% renewable, we have to be able to ramp up and down. And so we have that as part of the design palette is that intermittent operation. But typically we would, in this case, being plugged into shore power, we'd probably want to run all the time. And the idea there is that you'd have kind of a fraction of the total water that a community is using would be desal from us, and the rest of it comes from the other sources. So we're effectively what we're doing is we're displacing water that can be used other places or can be stored, and then the desal, because it's very high quality water, just goes right out into the system.
And can Darren with his beach house have like a little one of those just for himself?
I mean, would it eventually get to that level where
Right.
people could just buy them and put them out 200 feet offshore?
Yeah, I mean, you think 100,000 gallons a day is a lot of water for for a beach house.
I mean, if you bring them to much smaller, would it not
You
work?
scale them
No,
down.
you can make it. They actually have, like, for sale. I mean, boats have them, right?
Oh.
They're what they call water makers, and water makers are scaled for. So yeah, so you actually, if you have coastal access, the problem is that as soon as you try to take seawater out, you're in a permit. Like permitting comes into play immediately, and I don't know if there's some de minimis amount where you wouldn't have to address, but I think
What about a presidential executive order that says we don't need a permit for desal?
yeah, that
Potentially work.
or we can dream.
So I remember you were here and you presented to city council in the summer of last year.
Yeah.
How do you think that went?
I think it went reasonably well. I mean, talked to city council later. They seem to be
Okay.
generally receptive.
So they took you on. They actually asked for more information and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I've been twice now to present to them, and so it's. I think that part of the challenge with something new like this is that people want to see it operating, and so the unit will
mock up somewhere, right?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is nothing unfamiliar to somebody that knows desalination. We're using conventional equipment. We're doing it in a different way, and I think the breakthrough is taking this idea of onshore desalination and then really optimizing it for offshore. And so we've got a lot of cool stuff that's part of our system that we would never have discovered if we weren't constrained at putting it in a buoy out in the water.
And you said, and as we were speaking prior to this, you mentioned that you have a first project underway somewhere near New Zealand. Yeah.
We have a first deployment. We're building the first unit outside of Auckland, New Zealand, and as of March this year, we plan to have it in the water operating to be the first demonstration of a full-size buoy that that would be the same.
What was their motivation to have one?
Well, their motivation was that we asked them if we could deploy it off their wharf. So it's a wharf that has the right water depth, and New Zealand is an interesting place. They have certain traditions from probably carried over from their English colony kinds of days, and so there's a certain conservatism, and there's also a certain openness to new ideas, and so we happen to be, I think, hitting a point of interest for a lot of people over there that this is great. This is a good new technology. Let's see how it works and let's deploy it. And so we're looking. That's kind of with the challenges in California, as you guys were talking about permitting. It's like that is the biggest hurdle.
Well, we got the Coast Guard,
We got the
Step
Coast
one.
Guard. Yeah, step one.
What is the cost to put a system like this out?
Well, it depends on the site, and I'll be a little bit coy about putting numbers on the table. But I guess as a reference, we're building it in a factory, so we're not building a custom plant on shore. We don't have a lot of contractors out, engineers designing, contractors building.
You're building a car, not a house.
Building our house. Exactly. So the advantage of that is that we can control our supply chain. We know what it's going to cost. We put it all together, and then we deploy the plant as a in a unit. Of course, there has to be pipeline built. There's some balance of plant construction that needs to happen. But anyway, the result is small unit. Compare that to, say, Carlsbad desalination plant, which is roughly 500 times more water capacity than one of our buoys. And we come out better on our water cost than theirs is. I mean, and water pricing and costs are a little bit hard to nail down, but we have the other desal plant in California. There's actually 4 plants, but there's 2 that are supporting cities, and one's in Santa Barbara and one's down in Carlsbad. And I know for a fact that we're well below the cost of water for the Santa Barbara plant, because I know the numbers there. I'm not as
You
familiar
know,
with.
for a city like Malibu, are we talking? You know, you don't have to give specific numbers. Sure. Are we talking in sort of like the hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars?
Or hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's like, what is?
Billions of dollars.
How should we think
Well,
about?
just think about it as the cost per unit of water that you make, right? Because you can make different sizes. We can bring in different buoys. And the way, I guess the way to think about it is there's the capital cost of building a plant, or even recycling plants. For example, there's a lot of work going on new recycling plants in California. And just as a point of reference on cost for a new recycling plant, just as an example, there's a project that has been canceled now up in outside of San Luis Obispo that was called Central Coast Blue Recycle Plant. It was $61,000 per acre foot per year of water capacity, which acre foot is the amount of water, you know, that covers an acre in a foot deep. So that's, you know, that's kind of how big water's talked about, is acre feet. So this is $61,000 per acre foot for a plant that, you know, modern technology. Ours is about 14,000 per acre foot per year. So just a sense of scale. The site's reservoir, which is big California infrastructure project, that's coming in at like 35,000 an acre foot of the amount of water that they can take, free water, put it back out, and it costs about that. So we've been looking, kind of benchmarking ourselves against all these California projects, and we think recycling is great. We storage is great. All these things. This is kind of an all of the above moment that we really have to kind of get on top of water here, because Malibu gets all of its water from somewhere else. So being out here, this is the end of the pipeline, and the pipeline starts up in the Sacramento River Delta, up in near Sacramento Bay Area, for the State Water Project, which brings water down by canal, and then you've got the Colorado River and the Colorado River Aqueduct that brings water in from there. So though having multiple sources is good because you kind of hedge your bets, but here today, right now, we are like 52%, I think, of the snowpack in the Sierras that we normally have this time of year.
Yeah, and every year that's really the big number everyone focuses on. What's the snowpack relative to normal? What's the water going to be like for the rest of the year based on the snowpack? And you really can't rely on it, but this desalination off the pier or wherever,
Yeah,
forever.
it just sits out there and just brings water.
it's
in.
never going to change.
Yeah.
Well,
We have to
probably
add
more
or
ocean
subtract
water,
the
right?
wells,
Do you know how much
No,
water
it's-
Malibu uses? Sorry, do we know how much water Malibu uses?
Let's see, doing a little math in my head here. I don't quote me, but it's something like 8,000 acre feet, Malibu and Topanga per year, somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 acre feet.
What's the consumption of an average household, like a family of 4 or 5?
So California has set a goal for water conservation to be 55 gallons per person per day.
Okay.
So that's kind of a reference, and some places are doing better than that, some are worse. It doesn't take into account necessarily irrigation water, which mostly is fresh water coming out of your freshwater system. So the main kind of throttle on water use, of course, is just cost of water.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
And the cost is driven by the infrastructure and the supply. Is the water that Seawell creates, is it potable or just for irrigation use?
well, so what's coming off of the buoy is pure desalinated water. So what we've done is we've taken all the minerals out, almost all of them. There's still a little bit of mineral content, but it's mostly pure water. It's like rainwater. That's essentially what we're producing.
But there's still bacteria in there. And
Well, we have disinfection happening out on the buoy as well. However,
UV.
we use UV. Yeah. Yeah.
Will the water then go to a treatment plant afterward? Is that
Well, we have something
Yeah.
called the water station, which is a little modular building that does two things. It does final disinfection to be sure that it's meeting potable water quality standards, and it's accessible for somebody every day to, you know, keep track of it if they want to. But the other part that's important is that because we take so many minerals out of the water, we have to actually put minerals back in, because otherwise it eats away at copper pipes. And so there's a remineralization of calcium carbonate that happens, and it's all, you know, it's very straightforward, not a big part of the process. Low energy demand. You have to restock the calcium carbonate periodically.
How often?
Depends on how much water and you know, how big the silo is and so on. But it's not. It's a
Like once a month?
relatively infrequent. Yeah, something like once a month. Yeah.
Is there a water bottling and distribution company coming out of this at some point?
Good question. Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause there's all types of bottled water, right? And mineral-free water. I don't know. Is that the same as deionized water? Or is
It's
a new thing?
It's similar to deionized water, just a different process because we're using reverse osmosis to take the minerals out. But yeah, it's really great water, and so that's part of it too. Is what, as we deliver this water to shore, what's the incumbent water look like that we're mixing with? And in some cases, we can reduce the dissolved solids just by blending with that water and make better water, you know, in the community, just because, you know, like in our case in Santa Barbara, we have really hard water. And so the desalination plant blends with it and reduces the hardness. And that's a really good thing.
What's the craziest regulatory ask you encountered? You know, I was listening to this. I was listening to somewhere. I forgot. And when they were building up SpaceX, they had to put earphones on a seal to study how the sonic boom or the sounds would affect the seal's reproductive behavior, and how traumatized they'd be, and so on and so forth. So there's actually a video of a seal in a lab setting or whatever with a little bit of water with headphones around it, and they're trying to say, and the seal looked pretty fine, you know, when the sound was going around.
Yeah. We don't think we'll have to do that test, fortunately, but no, I think that so again, back to desalination, the D word, I'll call it, which is there's a lot of regulation around desalination. There's something called the Ocean Plan, which is really the most kind of central, I guess, regulatory reference for how to handle the water going in and out of a desal plant. And so one of the things that is dictated in the Ocean Plan, and revised, I think, back in 2015, was that to use subsurface intakes. And so subsurface intake means you drill down through permeable shoreline, and you have the water coming through the sand and the beach essentially into the intake, which sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like
It's a filter. It's a filter, right? But the part that it doesn't allow is, like in our technology, we're not drilling a hole in the bottom of the ocean when we're, you know, out a mile from shore to try to have an intake through the sand. It's, you know, and I think the other, so that's of course our story, but for just a traditional desal plant to have to find a site that has the right geology to do this, you know, this.
So you're not exempt from geology either.
Well, no. When we're sitting on the geology, we're not going into the geology, right? So
It's a running joke here because when we were trying to rebuild our homes, that's been the number one sticking point, because Malibu's got all these interesting geological conditions and so on. And the homeowner's contention is, look, we've lost our homes to the fires, not any geological event.
Right.
Homes have been sitting around for the last 5 decades.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened, and yet they're having to go through a lot to establish that it's the right geology. Rebuild back what they have. So
okay, that's a crazy one that I appreciate that. But this is what's interesting about this particular requirement, is that it's not saying you should have a certain flow rate, minimum flow rate, let's say, that, you know, because if you're concerned about drawing organisms into the system, that's a specification you can design around flow rate. In the case of these subsurface intakes through a beach, is that they're basically saying, we're telling you what technology you have to use. We're not saying the criteria that, and maybe a subsurface intake would give you that velocity. They're just saying, So it's kind of picking, it's
parameters that force you into something.
and there's an exception that they say, well, if it's not monetary, you can petition for an exception. We're clearly an exception because it just isn't our system is clearly not going to work. Having to drill holes in the bottom, and then there's also a lot of construction impact to that too, because you use horizontal directional drilling of these wells into the beach, and there's just a lot of practical ways to go about this, and I think the rules, a lot of them just get off base from what's practical, as you guys, I'm sure, well know.
That's the nature of design.
Yeah.
So have you proposed something to the city of Malibu, or was it just like an introduction?
We have proposed a concept. We haven't asked the city to go ahead and endorse it yet because there's a lot of players that we need to work with. LA County District 29 owns a pipeline that runs through here. They provide the service to the residential customers. West Basin Municipal Water District is the seller to, they're essentially the water purveyor, if you will. They buy water from Metropolitan, and so there's a sort of chain of people all are part of the transaction of doing anything in water. Not to mention the regulatory side, the city, the community of Malibu, which is really an important part of this because we have an idea. We think we have the technology that would be kind of perfect here, would produce local water in Malibu for here that doesn't have any real measurable impact on the ocean. Obviously, it has to be done right, and that's really what we're all about. But I think the idea is that if there is community interest in this, then we have a project. And if there isn't, then
I'm not the whole community, but I'm interested.
thank you. Okay,
Sounds cool.
You're on the team.
So how many of those plants would we need to
A good question.
by all Malibu?
So to do 25% of the water supplied to Topanga, Malibu, because that's sort of how they look at the accounting of water around here, is we could put 18 buoys out, but it's not 18 individual buoys strung out. It would be 3 pods of buoys. A pod is like a docking station. We put 6 of the buoys around a pod, and then you just have 1 pipe and 1 power line coming from the pod. From each pod. So that's 3 pods. Would give you 25% of the water. Yeah.
Wow. And you said you're going to extend the buy one and get 2 free deal, right?
Absolutely. For you, you're the first.
So would it then tie into the District 29 lines?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not going to collect in some sort of a reservoir or anything of that sort, but it'll tie.
Well, they have reservoirs on the system, and so we may supply into a reservoir. There's a reservoir. I mean, the reservoir is near here that could work in that case. We have a letter of support from the county, so we've already met with them. We've met with West Basin County. I mean, we've really been walking the walk around here to try to get everybody focused on this. We've also met with some of the ocean environmental groups, which is really kind of the key. In many ways, they kind of dictate what the process is going to be about.
Because they can stop it with protests, lawsuits, you name
Yeah.
it, right?
I mean, it's just the story of, most of kind of, especially the water treatment and anything that requires substantial permits, that's, you're going to.
Does it have to be tied to the District 29 lines? Where my mind is going is, how could we use this system to avoid what happened January last year?
Yeah.
With the fire hydrants running dry? Because if it's tied to the same lines, then this won't really be another source. So can this somehow be created as a parallel source
Yeah, fire water only.
where District 29 runs dry? Then
Well, it would be boosting the source.
Yeah.
It would be boosting those lines, right? It's
Well, so here's an idea. I mean, this is what occurs to me when you said that is we bring a line to shore, we take the line inland up the hill where there is a reservoir tank. We supply into that tank, which is whatever the fire flow minimums are required. That would size the tank, and then supply that into the District 29 line. So in other words, it would be, and maybe the city actually controls some of the
flow.
The shut-off
Yeah.
valve, yeah. But that way you could also continuously keep producing water and supplying it into District 29, but you've got this buffer that's sitting up there
Yeah.
that's always ready to be used.
And just have those
And
buffers
you're going-
wherever they need on the top of a hill
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, exactly.
At any given point, we are assured that there's X amount of gallons. There's 1 million gallons that's sitting
Right,
there.
right.
Except if there's a power outage.
Not if,
No, it's not a
not if
gravity
it's,
feed,
gra-
right?
yeah, gravity feed, yeah, and that's the reason actually that you'd want to do
Yeah.
this, yeah.
How long would it last if there's a power outage?
As long as the tank has water in it.
Yeah, it's gravity fed.
Right? In Malibu West, do you remember how big their tank is?
No.
I mean,
Do you?
no, it's over millions, right? Sure, Malibu Josh knows, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
If
it
every
would-
unit has to kind of
so it would be a week's
without a
week's
tank.
supply or maybe more.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have to, obviously this is a scenario, you have to start looking at the costs and just how you do it. But we have been thinking about that as part of what can we bring to Malibu that would be helpful? And we've had some other ideas we're working on too that are based out in the water. But same thing. How can we support firefighting capability?
Are you guys a privately owned company? Do you have any sort of government funding at all, or?
At the moment, no. We are privately funded by family office of the founders. Been funding. We've been working on this for 8 years, so a lot of engineering and a lot of getting to know water in California, which has been quite an
What entities?
Yeah.
What entities support that effort, and are there any that say no, we don't want that at all? That's the most
Nobody has said no, we don't want it. I mean, it's really interesting because there are certainly a lot of people that might have some concern about this water source coming. And I think that part of it because our unit size is small. I mean, we don't represent a huge development scenario. Like if you, for example, the recycling plant that Metropolitan is developing right now, I think it's called Southern California Pure Water. That produces 150 million gallons a day when it's finally built. It's a big project, $10 million. You know, it's really a big deal. But once it's done, there's a lot of water there, and so you may think about how does that change the development, the demographics of that area if it's water rich in one spot. And so it's sort of the dilemma of the central plant is that now you have to start sending it out in all directions.
Got to build all that infrastructure.
Yeah, no, they have a lot of built-in infrastructure that they will be supplying into, but in our case, we can put buoys up and along the coast wherever it's needed, and be much more flexible, not have to build pipelines that go back and forth, and also not. It's really install buoys to the extent the community wants them.
So it's not just about creating the water; it's also about the urban planning part of it.
It is,
right?
yeah, and that's sort of what it comes down to. It's urban planning, permitting, and and having kind of a understanding of what the technology can do. And that's the part that we're still kind of behind the curve on, is being able to explain to anyone what is this idea and why is it different. And
About 3-4 years back when we were having these, a long dry patch, desalination was the talk of the town. Everybody was talking, what's going to happen? California was running out of water and this and that. And then we had a couple of seasons of very strong rainfall.
Everyone forgot.
yeah,
Everyone forgot.
that's what happens.
They start
There's
wondering-
journalists that tend to always have the drought series, though, right? LA Times does one every
Yeah.
couple of years, talks about the Owens River Valley, the history of Mulholland creating what gave birth to LA,
Right.
and how that's not going to be reliable anymore.
Yeah,
Thus, desalination. And just a hint, urban planning is not what you want to say in Malibu. Call it wildlands or rural.
okay, rural planning. Yes.
But this it seems like a good fit for rural planning, in as much as it is small, decentralized, and it can be used locally rather than creating a big blob of water in a
Yeah,
water-rich area.
Exactly.
Sounds a lot more efficient. And how long does it take from word go to set it up?
Well, so there's a site variable, which is where are you putting it. So it's really the putting the pipeline in, and the rest of it is quick. Like we deploy them horizontally towed behind a small workboat because it doesn't require a big, oil, the kind of vessels that they use to do large infrastructure. This is very small, and you just tow it in, ballast it vertical, connect up the anchor chains, plug in the umbilicals into the pipeline, and turn on the switch. Right.
The March launching in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Come May, we should have like some sort of crazy success story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
We all get to be on that boat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you guys are all invited to come over to Auckland. Yeah.
No, this is great. I mean, this is just fascinating stuff, and we wish you success.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be in a community that really cares about, its outcome in the future. And I think that the moment right now, with all the rebuilding going on and everybody really rethinking, like, what is resiliency and what is sustainability? It's like, well, do you really want to rely on water that comes from 400 miles away, or do you want to have that your water that you control?
And now more than ever, people have started to think about that.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things that we had taken for granted, which we no longer are.
Yeah. It's the Malibu. Yeah, it's
Like
Santa Barbara's.
having a house.
Well, right.
Or power supply, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
thinking microgrids, now micro water, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of big power and big water.
Yeah, it's just.
But listen, sounds like at a minimum, you got one buoy.
Yeah, I'll be your cheerleader.
Who else wants one of it?
No, this is fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate having a chance to chat with you guys. Yeah, thank you.